Welcome to Forbidden Planet TV. Happy 2023 on Forbidden Planet TV. It's a pleasure to be joined by two returning guests, the one and only Ram V and the one and only Christian Wood. How you doing, gents?
Very well, thank you.
Been all right. Bit cold out here, but otherwise okay.
It is indeed cold, very snowy here, and
Yeah.
that's even in West London. Is it snowy where you guys are?
No, it's not here yet. It's very cold, but no snow. Fingers crossed it remains that way.
Last night I was looking out of my window and it had just started snowing, and I was like, "Oh, it's a little bit of snow. It'll be fine." I spent about a couple of hours working. Then I stepped out and looked outside again, and everything was just covered in about 3 inches of snow. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I had one of those like midnight snowscapes that compelled me to take a photo. It felt so utterly seasonal.
Yeah.
Guys, you had both of you separately and together had amazingly like creative 2022 and some great sort of creative high points. One of which, of course, was your joint project, Aquaman Andromeda. Which everyone can order the individual copies of right here from forbiddenplanet.com. But what can you tell me about the genesis of that project?
I'll Ram take that.
It started when DC Black Label reached out to me and they said, "Look, we want you to take on one of the sort of bigger characters at DC, but give them a kind of treatment that they've never had before." And one of those ideas that I'd had sort of rolling around my head for a while had been, no one's done a deep sea survival horror take with Aquaman. He'd always been this kind of fantastical Game of Thrones or Lord of the Rings under the sea kind of character, and to take that and put that in a completely sci-fi setting seemed fascinating to me. So I pitched them the idea. They loved it. We started talking about artists, and a few names were bandied back and forth, and then suddenly Christian's name got mentioned, and there was this kind of immediate silence and sinking of the minds as everyone went like, "Of course, deep sea horror, Black Label format, underwater, scary ocean stuff. Why didn't we think of Christian right away?" So it was incredible that Christian came on board, and yeah, the book is just, I can't imagine the book without that art, without that approach now, even if I tried. Yeah, I think Christian's work is intrinsically tied to the experience of the book now.
And how did you find working on it, Christian?
Yeah, it was amazing. Well, it was funny because I'm sure I was quite frustrating to begin with, because like when Black Label reached out to me, as Ram will probably remember, I wasn't entirely sure if I was going to be able to do the book initially. As enticing and as exciting as it was, ticking off lots of things that I'd wanted to do, big prestige DC book. Underwater horror, like for Ram, was a big thing for me. So it was the perfect rounding. But at that point, I'd already agreed to a book that has now entered the ether and may become a thing at some other point. Who knows? And we had a lot of backwards and forwards going, "Oh, I don't know if I can do it because I've kind of said yes to this other thing." But the law of it and the law of it just became kind of too big. Just to sort of, it was just like I thought, if I say no to this, it's gonna haunt me. It'll be the thing, like the characters in the book. It'll be the thing that I flash back to in years to come and be like, "Why didn't I?" And I knew I had to do it, and it was just so much fun just to kind of do something so creepy and dark and vaguely kind of like Lovecraftian. It was just it was just butter on toast. It was just delicious just to kind of eat it up. It was great fun, and the thing that's so wonderful about Black Label and the wonderful editors there is just the freedom that they give you, and just to be able to do anything really, like really anything, just to be able to sort of like do things with characters that as Ram kind of pointed out, that have never been done and maybe will never be done again. And that's just That's just a
the
gift.
beauty of watching people come to this book, getting those kind of reactions live, going like, I don't understand this. You know, a lot of people, some of the people react incredibly well. They go, oh my god, this is amazing. Then there are others who are like, no, this is taking something I'm so intimately familiar with and changing it. And then letting the book live for a while, and now you're getting the, oh, I see what they did, I see it's cool, I see, I have not seen this before, this is such an incredibly cool take. Because what I think it did is it brought a lot of people to Aquaman who hadn't necessarily been
Yeah.
big Aquaman fans, and now it's always a little bit humbling to know that like this is someone's first Aquaman book, and so I've ruined everything else for them.
I think the thing that's interesting is that for many years, even sort of pop culturally speaking, for decades, you know, Aquaman has been something of a gag character, you know, something of a punchline in a variety of jokes, right? And there's an argument, I think, definitely in the pre-Jason Momoa era, that the most, for all the great Aquaman comics that have been, and there have been some great ones by Peter David, Neil Posner, other guys, that actually the most abiding image of Aquaman is his kind of Super Friends iteration, which is used in 1,000 ridiculous memes, you know, across the internet and throughout the pop culture sphere. But what was it like wrestling with that kind of preconception, knowing that you were delivering what it is that you delivered?
I mean, I ignore the internet mostly anyway, so so I don't. I mean, these are I don't know. These are archetypal characters, right? So they are to be made fun of, but they're also to be taken very seriously. They are absurd and clearly not real, but they're also very real and fantastical at the same time. So I feel like these characters, they take on whatever lens you want to view them and the world around them through. So firstly, I ignore the internet, and secondly, I'm happy with, there should be memes, but also there should be an underwater serious horror take that looks at humanity in reflection of their own myths and the narratives that they create. So
Yeah, I mean, my personal reaction was that you just took it into a glorious direction. That book, that character has not been taken before, and a lot of people bandy those kind of comments around when they're talking about fresh new takes on characters. But you really did something, have done something, have achieved something very different with it. Christian, how long did you take illustrating the book?
Well, not as long as you'd think, really. I think one issue was I did in about 6 or 7 weeks.
Wow.
I mean, the thing with comics, it's just like once that the machine is rolling, you know that treadmill is going. You just got to get it done. Do you know what I mean? It's like boom, 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 boom. And I often find there's this misconception that that time spent on art equals good art, which I don't prescribe to. I think kind of it's really sometimes you need that kind of like deadline pressure, and you need that kind of like, something snapping at your heels just to kind of like take your mind out of it. So you're not overthinking pages, you're not overthinking art, and it becomes far more visceral and just like instinctive. So I mean, I think the first issue I probably spent maybe 8 or 9 weeks, and then it was 7 and then 6 weeks, I think, or roughly, maybe give or take a few days here or there. It was pretty rapid. And
I
the
also
thing is,
imagine as the book goes on, Christian, you become familiar. I found this to be the case. I became familiar with your language for the book, and so it becomes easier for me to write the next scripts going, this is what Christian would do with it if I put this on the script, rather than me sort of writing for a hypothetical artist,
Yeah, I mean, and that's the thing. I mean, the first issues always take you longer because you're setting up kind of like your language barriers and visually what you're going to do. And then once those parameters are sort of like set up, you're working within those parameters, and it's okay, it's going to be within this, so I don't need to be thinking outside of this box. It's very much within the box. So it's I often think kind of like when it comes to choosing artists for projects, that's the hardest thing. That's the thing that takes the most time. And when you get the right artist for a book, and I say this as a writer now as well, it's almost like you can kind of like, though that's the hardest choice, and then you just let everything else kind of just happen. So the art was pretty effortless, really. You know, it's, you can't get it wrong. I mean, once I knew I was approaching the underwater sea, the deep sea, as basically a cosmic space, you know, as alien as outer space. Once I knew that, and I was applying the same sorts of visuals, tweaked to some degree, that I would have done in like some of my kind of cosmic books like Odyssey and The Invisible Kingdom. Once I knew that it was an alien landscape, it was, you know, it was pretty, excuse the pun, smooth sailing. Yeah, it was good. But like, yeah, it's, if it looks if it looks like it was time consuming, then I did my job well, but it wasn't.
I had assumed it was highly time consuming
Yeah.
because of the depth, no pun intended, of the experience. Are you guys planning on working together again at some point in the future? Have you got anything else you'd like to put together?
Maybe, yeah. I mean, no discussions have been made.
This book was a bit of a bucket list item, in that I don't know if we've mentioned this before, but my very first visit to a convention, I was walking through and Christian was laying down the law for some newbie artist, asking advice from him. And about 45 minutes, I just stood there listening to Christian speak, and I was like, this guy is right. This guy knows what he's doing. And then fast forward, you know, 4 or 5 years later, to have the opportunity to work with, like, literally one of the first people I saw in international comics, whose work I love and respect so much. It was a bucket list item. So I've just been basking in the satisfaction of having been able to do that. But yes, of course, I'd love to work with Christian again. I don't think we've had any talks about it, but at some point. But I also know that Christian's very serious about his writing and wanting to make his own books. So the man deserves some space.
Well, I mean, that makes a lot of sense. And as to that note, you've both had, you know, very productive 2022s, both with your kind of special projects, if you will. So I'm thinking in terms of Christian with Headwind Sparrow, and with yourself, Ram, with the kind of ongoing legacy of the many deaths of Laila Starr. And then also you've got your ongoing projects, Bloodstained Teeth for Christian, and your epic run on Detective Comics for you, Ram. How do you feel about that year, looking back on it? As you know, a fan and somebody who works within the industry, it looks like you both had, you know, one of the richest, most productive years imaginable.
Yeah, Christian, I'll let you take it first. Yeah.
I'm tired. I say it, tired. I mean, like, it's weird because, like, you know, you get offered things, and sometimes you take things because you're like, well, that's going to kind of, like, you know, without being too cynical, it's going to, you know, take me to another level. It's going to kind of push my career forward. And everything is you kind of do because it's fun, and like you want to do something that's kind of memorable. When the Oscar Isaac thing, like I turned that book down twice, I think, before I did it, because I was so, like Rams alluded to with the previous question, I was so focused on wanting to do my own thing. And you know, this Hollywood guy comes and says, I want to do a book with you, and the first thing you think is, well, vanity projects, you know, it's a vehicle for you to kind of like star in. And I was just kind of, really want to do that, as much as I was a huge fan of Oscar. And then he got me on, I was put on Zoom with him, and the man is as charming and as lovely as you would hope he would be. And it kind of became apparent within about 10 minutes that it wasn't that, and it was a genuine thing and a genuine story, and a thing that actually, if it went off and did its own thing with him not even being a starring thing, then that's all the more reason for it to exist. So it kind of became a thing that I said yes to, because I was like, well, you're not going to get this chance again. And then you realize, oh, hang on, I've said yes to that, I've said yes to this, I've said yes to that, and before you know it, you're then, like, you know, juggling all these things. But going back to my point earlier, I just think sometimes a fire underneath you, and forcing yourself to kind of have to do things and have to work, and actually work on very disparate things. You know, the Headwinds was very different from Aquaman, you know, and like it could be quite fast and quick. And Aquaman was, despite what I said earlier, a little bit more laboured. So it's quite nice just to kind of juggle lots of different things and be quite interested in a lot of different things. And then obviously the writing with Bloodstained Teeth, that's a completely different muscle. So when I'm drawing, I was literally drawing Aquaman while in my head I'm writing Bloodstained Teeth, because Aquaman, any sort of drawing, is quite mindless once I'm in it. It's quite kind of almost spiritual. I go somewhere else and I'm drawing, but my mind is just like, okay, then this is going to happen, and this guy's going to do this, and then we're going to do this, and then so it's this weird balancing act of going, okay, well, I can write this issue while I draw this issue, so those two things are happening together. But actually, Head Wounds, even though it came out this year, that was done 2021, so it's actually, even though it's all been promoted this year, it's actually. It was a while ago I finished that. So it's just the illusion of being very busy. In actual fact, I'm only slightly busy.
I find your point about the way the different sides of the brain for these different creative endeavors to be quite fascinating, because I've had a conversation a couple of times with Gibbons where he's talking about the fact that when he's drawing, when he's illustrating, he can listen to podcasts, he can listen to music, he can listen to music with vocals, and it's that the part of the brain that's accessed there is it sits side by side. You can have all this kind of oral input, but you can still do your work. Whereas when he's writing something, you can't listen to anything where people are talking or there's words involved. It's fascinating to me. It makes a lot of sense as well. Ram, you've had this extremely long tail with Laila Starr, and it seems to me that that's one of those books that it's one of those books that I've recommended out to non-comics people quite a few times, much to the extreme pleasure once I've got into it. But it seems to have had this kind of long tail of discovery, where as successful as it was when it debuted, it continues to be so.
Yeah. You don't control these things. All I control is as long as the book is on my desk. So it's very heartening to see people react to it so positively. It's very lovely to see people still picking it up, and I know people who have double and triple dipped and have 2-3 copies of the single issues, have the soft cover, and now they're getting the hardcover from Boom that's coming up this year. So yeah, it's been lovely, but I don't know. I view it all as this kind of detached. Oh, cool! That book is quite successful, huh? I never. I don't know. I've never had that sense of attachment to a book once it has released. I'll gladly partake in its success, but it's done. It's out there. It belongs to other people now, and it's kind of cool to see everyone else pick it up and celebrate it and enjoy it with such love and adulation. I had a very lovely email from the French publisher for the book, Urban. They reached out and they said, we haven't had this kind of reaction to a book since Day Tripper. And so they reached out to Fabio Moon, who wrote a very lovely message saying that, oh, I love this, I read this, I did it, because he wrote the French foreword for the book as well. So it's just looking at stuff like that, I feel like I'm turned away from being a creator, and I'm also turned into a fan in some ways. Yeah,
that makes sense. Are you a fan of the book, Christian?
I love the book. I mean, before we started working on Aquaman, I reached out to Ram, like, it's my favorite of Ram's books, by a country mile. It's just so. I mean, it's every now and again you kind of like you kind of come up with something, or somebody comes up with something that just really kind of just captures magic. Do you know what I mean? And it's that sort of book that just kind of captures magic. And obviously the art in it by Felipe is just, just phenomenal. So just Ram and Felipe together. Is that how I pronounce the name? Felipe?
Yeah,
Felipe?
yeah.
Those two gents together, just
what a dance they create with the visuals and the poetry. I love, huge fan.
Yeah, it's that collaborative beauty, which of course is what you guys have achieved with Andromeda as well. You know, it's, I think it's great when you see two singular talents like yourselves, and where you're going to go with something is not always what you expect as a fan on the outside. You know, that's the beauty of like reading comics for me, and it's one of the few mediums I think that oscillates between you get people who can, you know, create the whole thing themselves, and then work with others to create at the same time, and you can go between what's the combination of creative talent you've got that goes to produce this effect. I think collaboration, like it does with music, can take you to really interesting places. And it's like McCartney delivering great stuff solo, but the stuff he creates with Lennon has a particular energy to it, right?
Sure.
You know, so I think it's a fascinating thing to talk about your current ongoing published successes. How are you feeling about Bloodstained Teeth, Christian? Because it's had such an amazing reaction. I mean, that must be a very pleasing whirlwind to be sat in the centre of.
Oh, it's amazing. You know, it's but like to go to your point, it's you know, working with Patrick and Heather, who our colorist Heather Moore, Patrick Reynolds, the artist. It's just, I mean, I think kind of like talking about kind of creativity, you know, when I do like the book I'm working on next, without giving anything away, it's a solo project. It's the first thing that I've written and I've drawn. And so as I'm writing it, I'm kind of visualizing, oh, that's what I'm going to do with the page, and that's what I'm going to do with this sequence. And I'm getting a sense of what it's going to be. And even though when I put it down on paper, it'll be a little bit different, but it'll basically be roughly what I have in my mind. And I think one of the things I love about comics, and in particular quite around comics, is when you get two creatives like myself with Patrick, and you know, is that I don't visualize what I'm going to get, because it's kind of the baby that we both make together. So it's a little bit of us both, and it's hopefully a surprise to both of us. And that's what's beautiful about comics. So kind of working with Patrick and Heather and just getting these pages back, you know, as you write this story that you've thought about for years, and it's starting to be visualized. I mean, that's just a gift. And then to sort of like, then for that to come into the world and people are talking about it. Like I listened to a podcast the other day, and like issue 6 has just come out, and issue 7, sorry, and people were talking about in the podcast what an arsehole Atticus Sloan, our kind of main protagonist, is. He's just an awful character, but they can't stop reading it because they want to know what's happening. And they all kind of go, well, what's going to happen? Could it be this? Could it be that? That's amazing. That's something that I had in my brain walking the dog 3 years ago. Do you know what I mean? It just popped into my head. I was just like, and now people are enjoying it. And that's what we do, you know, because we want to kind of tell people stories and entertain and take people on a ride. So in answer to your question, it's just been amazing just to sort of see people enjoying it and kind of like theorizing about it and chatting about it. And, you know, that's soul food right there.
I think people having a visceral personal response to a character that comes fully formed out of your brain, didn't exist before you wrote him, that must feel particularly satisfying.
It's amazing. And it's like, you know, and particularly when he's an arsehole, you're like, is this me? How much of me is in him? Because obviously I know he's an arsehole, but it's me as well, right? So like, but to, you know, when you're writing it, you're going, well, okay, I've got to tread this line of this guy being awful, but not so awful that people are just like, I don't want to read about him. So it's a delicate line to do that, like to have a character that's kind of, he is loved, but he's also kind of hated. I mean, that's amazing. You know, brilliant. I love it.
Yeah, that is wonderful to hear, mate. And Ram, you're also sat in the middle of a hurricane, a tornado, if you will. You know, writing the archetypal comic book superhero character with that wonderfully operatic run you've got on Detective Comics. How's that journey been, mate?
Yeah, good. Again, I think we're starting to see people sort of catching on to the aesthetics of the run. people understanding what it means to have this kind of operatic gothic Batman take. And I just love it because this is not even, I'm not even in the middle of it. Like, this is literally, we're six issues in ish. And the run I have planned is for about 25, 30 issues long. And so we're only getting started, and it has divided opinion. It has engendered incredible following. It has, you know, people have their takes on it. There are page-long essays written about the meaning of music and the various notations that have been used in the comic. I love that stuff. I love that stuff. But I also fundamentally think that I love writing characters, and that was very much my intention to write characters in this run and not necessarily do this kind of big plotting Batman run. And in that, it's been lovely to see people reacting to the way we've done a take on Two-Face, which is really sort of delving into the psyche of a character who essentially has two people living in one body, who was cured at the beginning of the run and now has three entities living in his body, if you will. So yeah, it's been great. I don't want to say too much about my plans for it, but again, by the time we are midway through this run, we will see that same kind of character reinvention with even Batman, in that, okay, we've seen the aging, faltering Bruce Wayne touched on before, but what does it really mean to age as a Batman in a city? Surely, yes, he'll find a million ways to prop his body up, but aging is about more than a body. It's about how you perceive yourself and your place in your surroundings. Aging means you're going to be left behind by a city that needed you once, and so what does that feel like? So all of those questions will be answered in this run, and it's kind of great, because in my head I can see what I'm going to do for the next 20-25 issues. It's always lovely when you're working on a, Christian, you may agree, when you're working on a story and you can see far ahead all the payoffs for all the little balls you're throwing up into the air right now, and nobody else can see them. So it's like your private secret. You're going like, wow, I know how awesome this is going to feel in 4 issues. So yeah, so it's been that kind of feeling. Obviously working with Rafa Albuquerque and Ivan Reis is amazing. Ivan's done a few issues now, and they are unlike anything he's done before, and I think people are seeing it. Like, they've come back and they've said, yes, I'm used to seeing Ivan as this kind of archetypal superhero character artist, but we're getting a new gothic, almost noirish, almost horror take from him. So it's been great.
Yeah, I mean, that's great to hear, mate. I something I've spoken a lot about on this show before, and I think I've probably spoken to both of you about it previously, is something that's always fascinated me, is, as a former music journalist, is the confluence between comics and music, which I actually think is far stronger than the confluence between comics and movies, which is what people often talk about because of the cinematic nature of comic book art. I get that. But there's something about the vibe of comics that really matches the experience of listening to music. And your work, Ram, always taps particularly strongly into that. You know, it's clearly a big part of your personal experience, but to bring that into the world of Batman, I think is a brilliant thing, something that I richly savor when I'm reading those issues.
Yeah, I'm glad. I mean, people keep asking about soundtrack recommendations, so I kind of do them off the cuff, but it's so wild. It varies so much. Like, I had Stabat Mater in there at one point. There's a Sergio Leone inspired, Enrico Mancini inspired, I should say, arc in there. Yeah, it's gonna get crazy and weird, and I love doing it to music, because you were mentioning this before. when Christian was talking about I can draw and I can listen to podcasts and or audiobooks on the side, like I prefer to write listening to, not with words, but at least atmospheric music. And so a lot of my writing actually starts with me just sat in a chair listening to music that will inspire visuals, that will inspire emotions. And often I don't even know what the outline to an issue is until I've put on some sort of proper atmospheric music and I'm listening to it, and it will create story in your head. So the relationship between music and comics is almost creative. It's not even a matter of how you express it on the page. Like the way it is generated in your head has a lot to do with what you're listening to and what rhythm and what pace it is in. So
yeah, I think that it's so eternally interesting to me, and I think that's very well said. Guys, thank you both for joining me on this first Forbidden Planet TV of 2023. As we've just been talking about, you guys have both had an epic and richly satisfying as a reader 2022, just filled with these great projects, all of which can be ordered from the forbiddenplanet.com links underneath our conversation. And I can't wait to see the new stuff that you're coming up with in throughout the rest of this year. And I look forward to seeing you both again. I hope you have a great year, guys.
Thank you. And Happy New Year to you too. And Happy New Year to all your listeners.
Happy New Year, guys. I'll see you soon. All the best. Cheerio. If you're enjoying watching Forbidden Planet TV and you're enjoying watching us talk to the world's most interesting and accomplished filmmakers, authors, artists, musicians, creators, subscribe right here. See you soon.